Okay, I hope all of you enjoyed the meal and had good food, because now we have to be ready and prepared for the next big thing on SAP systems. It's a thing that, multiple systems suffered already from, and now it's SAP's. So let me introduce to you Joris. He will present a talk about unknown default accounts. Thanks.
Thank you, Danke. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope lunch was not too heavy. If you guys fall asleep, I'll throw something. As introduced, I want to talk with you today about SAP default accounts. A problem SAP customers know of for already 20, 30 years. There's many known SAP default credentials. They're not secret. You can find them on the internet. But today I want to shine some new light on that and show some new default SAP credentials. These are the topics I want to talk about. By the way, if there's any questions, just shout. If there's too many, I might need to move on, but if you have any questions, please ask. Basically, I'll just show you what accounts we found when doing research, how you can exploit them, how you can protect yourself, and how you can be sure that they are in your systems or not. So, who are we? I'm one of the founders of ERPsec. We have been doing quite some SAP vulnerability assessments over the past time. Next to that, we have just a month ago released our own SAP security add-on running on the SAP Solution Manager. And personally, my background is a technical one in the SAP area. I've been doing SAP basis work and programming for the past 15 years. Next to that, I'm doing SAP security research. I like to break that stuff and report it like over 50 vulnerabilities to SAP. So before we dive into these default accounts, first something about SAP security. What we see at customers when we do assessments, and in general, especially in the Netherlands, where mainly we do our work, we see that there is more and more awareness at customers that they really need to do something more about SAP security than just the plain old authorizations, roles, and profiles. But from going from this awareness to real actions, we don't see it too much yet, and it's hard. Also, SAP itself is working hard on improving security. There's a lot of good initiatives lately. For example, people going to the SAP Tech Ed might have seen over the past few years that there's a special track for security as well. There's a lot of good white papers being released lately. One is created by Christian Wieperman. He is here in the room. Read those white papers. They definitely help you in making sense of all this complex matter. And next to that, SAP has been working on a security baseline, which is a document that can also give you a lot of guidance in securing your SAP systems. Go look it up. It's on the SAP Marketplace. I'll provide the links later on in the presentation. And next to that, I just read the news a couple of weeks ago that SAP now has a new global function for a CSO, a Chief Security Officer. I was told the position was there in the past, but it was announced like this was the first time ever that SAP had a global CSO. So let's hope that might improve security as well. Like I said, we see that more customers start actively securing their SAP platform. But what we notice is that it is mainly something that is being done by the most biggest SAP running customers. Let's say the Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000. But below those companies are like hundreds of thousands of SAP customers that are not that big. And they, well, often even lack the most basic security measures. That's not uncommon. In the presentation before, it was already mentioned by the people from Onapsis that they did research. Also, this is something interesting to read. It's a good read. It has some very bold statements, but I think the bottom line is that you should take SAP security more serious and, like I said, do more than just the basic authorizations and stuff like that. And a point I want to mention here is that in every single vulnerability assessment that we did with SAP running customers, we found default credentials. And this is not good. You can have the best procedures, code scanning, do whatever you want, but if there's still default accounts in your system, it's game over. And it might not always be in your productive system, but even if it's in a sandbox and there's RFC calls to other systems and you can pivot through the landscape to your production system, it's still not a good thing. So, and this is probably an open door, but when doing assessments, whether it's white box or penetration testing, and I know I see a lot of guys in the room that do penetration testing in SAP, the most easy way in is still basically via either a default account or via another big attack vector, which is the RFC gateway, leading to remote code execution, basically, and from there, the rest is simple. So like I said, hacking SAP systems often comes down to getting this credential. Either it be via a default credential, either it be via sniffing or social engineering or whatever to get this password. And this is a good bridge maybe to the presentation after mine, because the guys from ERP Scan will show you a lot of deep technical stuff. But my point is that although that is very interesting, and I like that a lot from a technical point of view, still the easiest way in is a default password. So you don't need buffer overflows or really extremely advanced persistent stuff if you can have default credentials. This is an overview I think most of you might know, have seen before, especially the ones that are into SAP and security. This is nothing new. These are all default credentials that are there for already maybe 20 years or longer. Especially these passwords, like 1992, 07, 06, they date from the specific date that SAP R3 was released to the market. So that's like, what is it, 24, almost 25 years ago. Still, you find these passwords in many customer systems. They're not all as critical, but some of them has a SAP all. Some of them are really easy. They have the password, and I don't know what brilliant guy or girl at SAP came up with the whole idea to create a new default password for TMS ADM, but still it's a default password and you find it in many systems. Also good to notice here the SAP star account. You can delete this user from your SAP system, but that might not be the best move because it's a hard-coded kernel user and it'll come back via this hard-coded way anyway. But this is all known, nothing new here. What is not so much known, not known at all probably for many customers, is that you might have a big chance that there's a whole bunch of other SAP default credentials in your SAP system, mainly the SAP Solution Manager. And in the next slides, I'll go through every single step you need to know about how these users were created, what roles they have, what the risk is, how they can be exploited, and how you can solve this. But this is something to take into account. This is really something that customers should check their systems for, especially if you're a customer that's already running SAP for quite some time. These users got created in systems until like 5 years ago or longer. And you might say, well, that's quite some time ago. Yes, but the SAP Solution Manager is around for quite some time. We found these users in systems that we did assessments on. It's not a theoretical thing. I cannot exactly say the percentage of systems that are affected. They are mainly created in the SAP Solution Manager, but at least more than half of the customers that we went to over the past months had these, at least one or more of these default accounts in their SAP Solution Manager. So how do they get created? And I'm not sure, I think most people here are from an SAP background, so will probably know the SAP Solution Manager, which is basically more or less a set of technical tooling that you can use as an SAP customer as supporting upgrades, downloading software, do documentation, use it for change request management. CHAR might ring a bell. These are all technical scenarios. Some of them are more in the functional area. And every SAP customer has it. SAP started pushing this solution already many years ago. For example, for downloading software, you definitely need the SAP Solution Manager. Otherwise, you cannot do any maintenance on your whole SAP landscape. The users that I showed before, they get created by running a specific wizard. After installing an SAP Solution Manager, you cannot use it at all because you need to do a lot of technical setup. This is done by a transaction, Solman setup, which starts wizards to do initial and basic setup, and that's where these users got created. This is an example, and I'll show you in the next slide the default password. There it is again, init1234. Not very creative. You can still look it up. It's still in most SAP Solution Manager systems, even if you patched it to the most recent level, this initial value is still there, but it's not being used anymore. So currently, if you install a whole new SAP Solution Manager, this password will not be used. You have to provide your own custom password. But still, if you look up this class in the system, in an SAP Solution Manager, you will find this password initial attribute with the initial value init1234. That was used in the past to create these users.
When was this fixed? It's mandatory, you have to provide your own password.
Yeah, I don't have a specific date. The question, by the way, was when was this fixed? We have a lab with many SAP systems and versions, but not all the versions for the SAP Solution Manager. At least I know that systems where you run these wizards 5 years ago, they still got created with this default password. I think it's fixed somewhere between 3 and 5 years ago, but that's more a guess than a definite answer. So why do these users get created? Basically because the SAP Solution Manager needs to do a lot of local processing for all kinds of scenarios, and in some cases also needs to connect to other systems. Depending on the number of features that you use, depending on the scenarios, you will have one or more of these users in your system. Yeah, as mentioned, where do they get created? Most of them get created in the SAP Solution Manager, but there are some exceptions. I will show later on in a demo, for example, this SMD agent underscore SIT, where SIT is the system ID of the Solution Manager. I will show you a demo that this user is also in other systems. It can actually be in every connected SAP system that is connected to your Solution Manager. So that means serious impact. So if you want to know whether these users are in your system or not, basically the question is, how long have you been using the SAP Solution Manager? If you already use it for 5 years or longer, and you have run this setup 5 years ago or longer, chances are really high these users are there. And it might sound like a long time, 5 years, but as mentioned, already as of 2007, SAP made it impossible for you as a customer to download software patches if you did not use the SAP Solution Manager. So every SAP customer has been using this Solution Manager for a long time, and you cannot use it without running this Solman setup transaction anyway. So the chances are really big that there are many customers out there that have at least one or more of these users in their system. One thing good to mention here, if you have installed this Solution Manager like 10 years ago and upgraded to the most recent 7.1 version, then probably those users were just migrated and in your new system as well. If you, and that's what some customers do, don't want to upgrade from an old Solution Manager, let's say 7.01 to the new 7.1, some customers choose to just do a whole new installation. If that's what you have done as an SAP customer, then you probably will not have these users in your system. And also if you just installed a new one, let's say you have a new SAP implementation and you start from scratch, then these users will not be there. So, how bad is this? In general, one can say that if there's a default account in your SAP system, it's always bad. There are exploits that only need authentication in some kind of way without additional authorization. So even if you have a user with a default password with very limited authorizations, then still there are many exploits that can be used with such a user. But that's in the best scenario. The worst case scenario is that you have users in your system like Solman Batch. Solman Batch is a user which only has 2 roles, but they have quite a lot of authorizations. The SAP support user as well. There's many roles attached. So in general, if you have these users in your system, it's bad. In some cases, even the SAP J2EE admin role is assigned, which gives full authorization on the Java stack. And combined with these default users, there is a common bad practice in SAP land that is not helping either. To have good connectivity with your satellite systems from the Solution Manager, there's a mechanism called trusted RFCs that you can use to set up a trusted connection to the satellite system. To do so, you need to have a role with 2 specific authorization objects, SRFC ACL and the SRFC. But you should really restrict those roles. What a bad practice is in SAP land, and I've seen it a lot, is that people just assign a star to these 2 authorizations. It works. You have no issues at all, but it basically opens up your entire SAP system to do remote calls to any function module in your system. And next to that, the related problem is that some of the roles that SAP is shipping for these specific Solution Manager users, you need to fine-tune them. You need to tune them for your specific customer situation. So some of these authorization objects are not filled. And what I've seen a lot at customers, also in that case, they just assign a star because then it works anyway. But you really open up these default accounts to way more than they should have access to. Something else that is sometimes not such good bad practice is that the Solution Manager system often is seen as a rather technical system where the normal authorization team is saying, well, we don't know too much about that. It's your party, they say to the basis team. And what I've seen is that the basis team often does the authorizations and roles and profiles on the SAP Solution Manager instead of the normal authorization team. I'm from a basis background, so I'm not blaming these guys, but it's not their daily routine to create roles and do authorization stuff. So if this system gets pushed to them by the authorization team, or if they pull it towards themselves, then it's not always a good idea to let them create authorization roles and profiles, because they often don't adhere to the guidelines and stuff like that. Many of these users get created with a lot of roles, and it's very complex. There is a guide, the security guide for the SAP Solution Manager. If you want to know specifically what users get created with what roles, read it. Don't do it on a late evening. It's like 600 pages, so you will definitely fall asleep. So, talking about risk and impact, we cannot skip the fact that the SAP Solution Manager is playing a very important role in your SAP landscape. Most often it's connected to all the other systems. If this system gets compromised, then it leaves the entire SAP landscape at risk. Basically, that's the message. So, let's go to the more active part, exploitation. I'll show you some examples of what you can do if one or more of these users are in your system with the default password. It's by far not complete, because if you have these users in your system, the sky is the limit. You can abuse it for many things. Some examples, you can do native SQL execution. I'll show you this. But there's many other things you can do. Creating new SAP users, I'll also show you that in an example. But there's many, many other things you can do. This list is way longer. So keep in mind, I'll show you just some examples, but the sky is the limit. And good to know, it's all leading to a business compromise. And that's something to stress. These are technical exploits that I will show you. Not all of them are too technical, but it's not about technical exploits, it's about the business. If this is in your system, your business is running a big risk. All right, this is one of the first examples I want to show. Most of these users are system users, so they cannot be used in your normal SAP GUI to log on in an interactive way. There's an exception. The SAP support user is a dialog user, and I'll show you that although it has not SAP all, it still has quite some authorizations that you don't want to have. All right. Now, this is a screen I think you are all familiar with, the SAP GUI. And the SAP support user, like I said, is a dialog user. If I log on with init1234, which is the key password here, all these users have password init1234, then I have to change it. And this is what I've seen in some assessments, that this user was there, it's created but never used. But it's created with the default password. So I have to change the password now, but that's not a problem. I can create it like what I want. It helps if I type it the correct way. So, we are logged on with SAP support with the default password. Now what can we do? Not many things. Like SM49, a transaction to execute OS commands is not working. Let's use SE38 to execute ABAP programs. It's not working. However, SA38 is working. It's a bit more limited, but you can still execute ABAP programs. In this case, I'm combining it with an exploit, with a vulnerability that we found also by doing our own research to do OS command injection. This is a program that you can use in SAP to execute predefined OS commands, like the env command, which will give you an overview of all the environment variables and their values. You see, this is a predefined SAP OS command. But normally you're not allowed to go beyond a predefined list. It's a list of, let's say, 20, 30, maybe 40 predefined commands. However, we figured out a way. If you just say here, for example, ls and execute it, that it will give you a listing of the files on the server. And the same with who am I, you see that it gives me back the SIT ADM user of this specific operating system user. And this is not good, because if you can execute operating system commands as the SIT ADM, it's game over. Many of you know, maybe not everybody, basically there's 3 levels of fully compromising a system. If you get access to the database as the database scheme owner, if you get access with a user in the application as SAP all or very high rights, or if you can access the operating system layer with the SIT ADM user. What can this lead to? Well, for example, you can do SQL execution and retrieve any content of any table in SAP. In this specific example, it's just a T000 table with the clients, but you can do the same for every business table. This is game over, by the way. So if you have the sub-support user in your system with the default password, definitely check it.
So just a quick question.
Yes.
What was the transaction that you used to get into that external command page?
First SA38 to execute ABAP programs.
Yeah, after that?
And then here's the program that I used, RSSAA underscore call extern.
Okay, this is a default SAP program.
Yes.
So this is something.
No, this is all default SAP and it's patched, by the way. So I'll show later on in the references all the OSS notes that you can apply. So I have another example, as mentioned. We are going to use the SMD agent user for that one. The ones attending the BSEC workshop already know this one. But for the rest of you that haven't been there, let me first show you a bit of the background, what we're going to do. So again, we're not only going to exploit, we're not only going to use this default account, we're going to use 2 other vulnerabilities in SAP systems that we found by doing research. What it comes down to in the end is that we can do SQL execution, and we are going to make use of 2 function modules and this specific default user. One of the function modules that we are going to use for the SQL execution is this one, but this is a problem because this is a local function module. You cannot call it externally. So we found another function module, it's this one, that acts as a proxy. This one can be called remotely, and you can specify a local function module that you can then execute. So we are going to wrap this one in this one and call it externally via this SMD agent user. How does that work? I created a nice Python script for that. I'm not sure if this is really readable, but what it comes down to is, here is the proxy that we use to call this local function module to do a selection on the US RO2 table, which contains all the password hashes, which is interesting from an attacker point of view because you can brute force that and get access to many other users. So if we execute this, I just call this Python script. I specify, and it's maybe not that good readable. Let me magnify that a bit. think that's better, right? Can you see it in the back? What this script does is it connects to the SAP server client 001 with this SMD agent underscore SSM user, again with the default password that we figured out. And this Python script calls this SQL execute statement from this function module via this wrapper. It might take some time. And don't be scared by the output, because this is like an XML kind of output that it provides you. And in here are SAP users and their password hashes. And this is serious, because there's many open source tooling that you can use to brute force that offline. So you don't need to have any more access to the system. You can use these password hashes and do that from your lazy chair. I will show you an example. What I did is extract the password hashes that you just saw in this XML output, put it in a more nice readable format for OCL hashcat, which is an open source free password cracker that will help in brute forcing the password hashes. We'll do that here, and I'll provide this file with password hashes and let it run for some time. And again, already after a couple of seconds, we find a brute forced account with a password. If you let this run on way faster hardware, it will not be a match. These password hashes, especially the old B-code ones, they are easily crackable. Again, this means game over. So, apart from the other two examples, I created a third one. Again, we are going to use one of these default accounts, but another one. This one is called the Solman underscore batch, which is used for batch processing. This one often has very high privileges, especially the privilege to execute the function module sxpg step xpg start. And this is not good, because this can be used to execute, again, OS commands. What we will do, we will abuse this function module, and since we can execute OS commands, there's always an implicit trust relation between the operating system and the database. So the database can be accessed without a user and a password if you do it from the SIT ADM user, which we can have access to because the function module that we use is performing all these steps on the operating system as the SIT ADM user. We will use this to create a user in SAP, but we're going to do it directly in the database. For that, again, we created a Python script. It's a lot of information. Yeah.
Can you use control and numpad plus?
Control?
And numpad plus.
I'll do it different.
Yeah.
That helps? So, this Python script is calling this function module. People doing pen tests are probably familiar with it. Then, what we are going to do is some SQL executions. On the USR02 table, we are going to insert in client 001 a user go in. We are going to insert a password hash. This is a password hash where I know the password of. We created this user before, copied the password hash. It's system independent. You can insert it in another system and you know the password. Apart from that, we will and this is interesting, the people attending the BSEC workshop yesterday have seen this as well. The user will be assigned to a reference user, DADIC. How does it work? It means it can take over all the authorizations from the DDIC user. So let's just go and execute the script. So nothing fancy here. The same again, we provide the host system number, the client, the Solman batch user. This is important because it has way more authorizations. And again, the password init1234. The output it gives is that some roles in the database are affected. And if everything went okay, we should be able to log on to the SAP system with that specific user, which was go in and the password and in you go. I know that because I put in the password hash, and voila, we are in. Interesting to show here is that if you look at this specific user, that you will not have any application level logging. The problem again, since you create it directly in the database, is that you are not able to see who created it at what specific time, because that's normally something that the application will log. But since you do it directly in the database, you don't have that information. So for forensic purposes, this is a nightmare. All right. That for the exploitation part. Good to know and interesting to know is I want to share some more details about how we find this. We do quite some research, and one of the things that we did already quite some time ago is index all the ABAP coding in an SAP system. Normally, if you want to search the whole ABAP code base for specific statements, you can use a program called RS ABAP source scan, something like that. But it runs for many hours, and then you can only search for one string. That's not handy. So what we found out, and there's a nice guy, Martin Seronio, I think he's from South Africa, who used Solar as an indexer for ABAP coding. You can index the whole code base of an SAP system and then Google style search through it, which is way faster and it helps. And when...
John?
Yes?
Why wasn't Code Inspector by SAP sufficient for this?
Code Inspector is not indexing the ABAP code. The question was, why was Code Inspector not helpful here? Code Inspector is a tool that you can use to check your custom-written ABAP code for specific insecure statements and stuff like that. What I wanted is to search through the ABAP code base for specific vulnerable statements or default passwords. And I just, by luck, found this init1234 password because I was just trying 123456 or init12 something. And then I found this password and I thought, hey, that's strange. And then I just Googled that init1234 password because I wanted some more information. And then I found a nice guide. And I'll try to show that to you guys. It's this guide. The SAP Solution Manager 7.0 Enhancement Pack 1 End-to-End Root Cause Analysis Administrator Guide. This guide is already quite old. I can show you, I think it's 5-6 years old. There you go, February 2010. But this helped me, because if you search this document for this init1234, it's literally packed with this default password. It's there 10 times or something, and it describes all these users. For example, this user with this default password, but it's all over the document. It's there, it's there, it's there. And then I thought, hey, this is not good. The strange thing is, I don't think you can find this guide anymore on the internet. I'm not sure if SAP has anything to do with that. But we continued our search, And also by just doing a simple OSS node search, we found a specific OSS node that also made mention of this init1234 password. This specific node describes a problem you can have with your Wiley host agent connecting to your solution manager. And basically it says here, well, yeah, you can have issues if you don't have this password set to the default install value init1234. Okay. You're a customer, you want to know, do I have these users in my system? You can do a couple of things. As not many of them are dialog users, it's not needful or helpful to use the SAP GUI and just try to log on, because most of them are system users. What you can do, but that's already a lot of manual work, is use RFC connections to that system and try if these users and passwords are able to make a connection. A more easy way is just download a free tool that we provide from our website. You can install that on your system and it will just check whether you have these users in your system or not. Go download it. It's free and it's easy. So, solutions, yeah, it sounds simple. Change the passwords of these users. It's not always that simple. Some of these scenarios can have connections to a lot of systems. So you really need to know where these connections are being made to. And if you change the password, you don't want to break stuff, because some scenarios might not work anymore in the solution manager. The good thing is there are some nodes that will guide you in this. SAP has provided, for example, this node, 2119627, that helps you change the user and the password for these scenarios. And just yesterday I got an email from SAP where they stated that I should definitely mention this node. I have no idea why, because it's not yet released. But SAP said that in this node there will be additional information regarding my talk and probable solutions. I guess we have to wait. I just checked an hour ago, it was not released yet. So if you go home, if you check with your basis team whether these users are in your system, make sure you mention them this node. I guess it should help you. Yeah, and again, don't use stars in authorizations. So some more research is needed. We found these users in some systems, but I don't have a clue about the precise numbers of affected systems. I think there's a lot, but I don't have any hard numbers on that. And what's also interesting to further research is to better understand, for example, in which specific version this was introduced. And also there's room for research in the area of these users and the roles they have, because the roles that they have been provided, or the roles that are given to these users, they changed over time. Some users got less authorizations, but others were provided way more authorizations. So we don't have a clear picture of that exactly.
The note is released now.
It is released?
It was released yesterday, 3:04.
It's strange, I checked just an hour ago. So they backdated it probably. But it's there.
It's there. It's not very specific.
Too bad. I'll read it. Thanks. Yeah, as a quick wrap-up, please don't only trust on your segregation of duties mechanism when doing SAP security. There's this whole wide area of infrastructural related security that you should definitely look into. Make sure, and it's an open door, but make sure there's no whatsoever default account in your SAP systems. Patch, involve other teams. It has been said before many times, but this is really the way to go. You cannot only leave it to your SAP basis team to solve all your SAP security problems. Yeah, and maybe good to mention, it's not a nice thing to do, but read the documentation. There is so much documentation available from SAP. There is like a couple of 100 security guides. You cannot read them all, but read the ones specifically for your situation. There's tons of information available. All the references are here. The presentation will be on the website later on of Troopers, so you can later in a quiet moment review this in your own time. And basically that's my story. In case there are any questions, feel free to shout. I'll be around for at least 2 days, so you can always ask me later. Thanks.